Systems provide services to humans, and we can benefit from these services, and we could actually put an economic value onto the services. So, for example, providing fresh water would be an ecosystem service. Regulating the nutrient content of the soil by having healthy soils with lots of microorganisms that are recycling the dead and organic material would be an example of an ecosystem service. And then regulating the climate by taking carbon out of the atmosphere would be another example of an ecological service. So we could talk about the economic value of these services to humans, because if we didn't have normal, healthy ecosystem functioning, then we would have to expend money to do those services. So, for example, if we don't have healthy soils, agricultural soils, then we have to use fossil fuels and money to extract nitrogen from the atmosphere, to create synthetic fertilizers, and to put those fertilizers onto our soil so that our plants can grow. So that would be an economic value if we talk about like the cost. What is the cost if our soils aren't healthy? What is the cost if our forests are clear cutted and then we have landslides, and we have landslides that go and destroy homes and also roads, and we have to clean up those landslides? What is the cost of preserving that forest and not clear cutting it in the first place? So these are all benefits that can be given, in some cases, an economic value. There are other benefits that might be more difficult to value, like, for example, happiness. So if you live in a very disturbed environment, perhaps you have a decrease in happiness, in health, in vitality, as opposed to, say, for example, if there are healthy, normal functioning forests nearby where you live that you can go and experience, then that could improve your life, and in ways that it would be very hard to put an economic value on. So an example of a country which has tried to put some economic values and pay for ecosystem services and the conservation of ecosystems is Costa Rica. So Costa Rica is known for its relatively healthy ecosystems. It is in Central America, and it has a variety of habitats, including like mountains at the center, and then obviously lots of coastline. When we look at the program that they put in place to value ecosystem services, they recognized that forests provided some of these benefits. So they protect watershed. The watershed is, for example, all of the area of the land where when water falls, it eventually drains. And so forests can cleanse that water by filtering pollutants. We could have conservation water, and we reduce flooding and soil erosion. So, for example, another example of this maybe in the US would be when we straighten waterways and we don't allow for wetlands, then what tends to happen is that when we have heavy rains, then we get flooding, and then it's very, very costly to clean up that flooding, specifically if it happens to be people that are living within the flooding area. We could also talk about biodiversity and how important that is, giving that an economic value. It could have an economic value in terms of tourism. It could also have an economic value in terms of medicine, because a lot of our pharmacological medicines come from plants, and these could have value. We could also talk about just having the beauty and how this having healthy ecosystems might encourage people to go out and exercise and to recreate in those places, and that might actually decrease disease and health-related issues that become very expensive, like perhaps diabetes, and then also bringing in money for the economy. And then finally, carbon sequestration is super important part of the carbon cycle, because carbon builds up in the atmosphere, and And trees actually remove that carbon, so they are considered to be a carbon sink. And hopefully, by having and paying for forests, we might be able to slow the increasing accumulation of carbon in our atmosphere because of the burning of fossil fuels. We look at this Costa Rica as an example of a success story because prior to the late 1980s, they were having dramatic reduction in forest cover. So there was lots of deforestation. And then when they implemented the governmental policy of paying for these environmental services, so paying for people to protect land, to not cut forests, for example, then has been an increase in that forested area, and that has helped them economically because they don't have to pay for loss of land due to erosion. They don't have to pay for clean water as much as they would if there was no forest, and then they also have the added benefit of ecotourism. So this is an example of how we can look at the economics of conservation and see if there are ways that we could provide a value to these services that these healthy ecosystems provide to humans.